Today's guest is a return guest. His name is David C. Olcott. I had to have him on the show again to finish out our discussion about his incredible book that's entitled Swords of Illumination. I cannot recommend this book enough. Let me tell you a little bit about David. David is the founder, president, and CEO of Samurai Success, an international executive, organizational, and personal coaching firm headquartered in Denver, Colorado. Throughout his more than 35 years of professional coaching experience, David has worked with numerous individuals, organizations, and companies throughout the United States and Hong Kong. His coaching focuses on developing strategies and structures that provide for sustainable growth and productivity. He's a nationally known motivational speaker and lecturer. His dynamic and positive approach energizes audiences to move from being a worrier to blossoming into a warrior. During many of his presentations, he has motivated people without any martial arts training to join him on stage and smash boards with their bare hands, so you get the vibe. Prior to founding Samurai Success, David was a #1 national trainer for Tony Robbins and was the business manager to the #1 selling real estate agent in the world. And he kind of mentions that on this episode, so stay tuned for that at the end. He has also enjoyed a distinguished career in the world of public service. He's a master certified Neuro-Linguistic Programming practitioner, and also has a background in finance and business, and wow, he's just amazing. The thing about David, if you didn't hear my first episode with him, I can't recommend it enough, especially if you are you like to marvel at the human psyche and subconscious behaviors and what actually leads to success and what doesn't. And we really got into it in our first part of the discussion of Swords of Illumination. And I candidly admitted that I hadn't finished the book yet on that episode. So I had to have him back on so we could finish. And I can't recommend it enough. We'll link it up. Swords of Illumination. It's on Amazon. There is an Audible now. Yay. So if you're like me, that's good news. But there's also, you can get the hardback or download or whatever. Okay. I'm not going to take up any more time on the intro. Let's get into this amazing discussion with David C. Olcott. Okay, David, I'm so glad that we get to finish our discussion of your book, Swords of Illumination. I've been recommending this book to everybody. Several of my clients have read it. And I'm also very pleased to announce that you have it on Audible now as well, which is very helpful for people like me that have become very dependent on Audible for my book, quote unquote, reading. The last time we spoke, which was the most insanely amazing discussion ever. I'm being real. If you haven't listened to that episode, I highly recommend. But in that discussion, I had only read part of the book, and there are these swords. So to recap, if you haven't, heard the first podcast, the book Swords of Illumination is in story format. David is an incredible success, business, mindset coach. I guess you should say like a consultant. What do you call yourself, David? Coach. Okay. And he chose to write this book in story format about a young man becoming a samurai in, old feudal Japan. And at that time that we recorded our first episode, I was only to the part where he gets to this school where he's going to become trained to become a samurai. And now I finished the book. So we are going to get deeper today.
Oh, yeah.
Deeper today. So in this book, the main character's name is Yoshi, and Yoshi gets a series of swords that he has to learn all these lessons and apply in his life. And the first one that we discussed last time, but I want to just recap it because it's so important. And David, there's like a question that comes with each sword. That question has come up for me so many times in my life. So thank you so much. And the question that comes with the sword of identity, which is the first sword that Yoshi receives, is who am I in this moment? I've been asking myself that like crazy. It's such a helpful question. So can we just, a quick discussion of that one so we can lead into these others with the basis of that sword? What do you mean by this? Why is this an important key for us to have in our lives of knowing our identity and being able to apply it in each moment?
So as you and I talked about last time, this was really kind of a love letter to myself, right? This book. And I really mean that because for whatever reason, I believe I've been here before and I'm coming back. And so I didn't want to lose the knowledge that I had gained this lifetime. And I was really fearful of it. I know that sounds crazy, but it's the funniest things that sometimes spark our fears, right? And I was
Mhm,
like, oh my gosh, I'm going to have to start all over again. What if I didn't? What if I
mhm,
could take, because there was a question that someone asked me, is this, if you could take the knowledge that you had and just give yourself when you're 10 or 12 or 15 years old, I mean, what would your life be like? And I was like, oh my God, what if I could really do that? And
mhm,
so this book is the accumulation of what we call the swords of illumination, these key principles about how to create something we call programming. And your programming is what really makes these decisions for you in your life. So we're
mhm,
manifesting from this place 95% of the time. So I was like, how can I tap into that? What are the elements of that? Is there structure? And I knew that a loving God would never put me on this planet without some kind of structure. I just had to go seek it. So
mhm,
this is the accumulation of all that knowledge over the past 57 years of my life, and especially the last 30 years of my life, is not only as a coach, but really taking a look at this physical plane, the spiritual plane, and us as humans and how we interact with those three things. So, this identity, starting off the book, is the primary source of all of our manifestation, including our destiny. That means that when we understand how to create this identity for ourselves, and there are people on this planet doing this, you see them, you call them famous people, you call them successful people. This is what we're doing. And I
mhm,
was like, well, okay, that's nice, but how are they doing that? What is this structure, if there was any, that could really be brought and make practical? Because the spiritual stuff that I've been through my lifetime, which has been remarkable, has also frustrated me a lot because it didn't see, like, how do I apply that, Tara? How do I make that real? I mean, that was a really nice quote and really inspirational, but how do you take that and apply that in this physical plane? And so this was what was understood, is that all these things that we have, these discussions, as well-meaning as they are, these loving moments that we have with each other, do not change your programming.
yeah.
So you and I can go to a seminar, you and I can listen to a book, you and I can listen to a great podcast, you and I can listen to the greatest speaker ever on this planet, and nothing's going to change. And the reason for that is because there is a universal law here in this physical plane called the law of experience. You are here as a soul to come and experience that which you know you are.
Mm,
Because in the other dimension, you don't get a chance to do that. You are everything. So there is no chance to experience that. Here in this physical realm, purpose built for us as humans, as souls, to come here and experience that knowingness.
mhm,
Now that's that. When I first got that knowledge, I was blown away. I was like, oh my God, that starts to explain why this whole place exists, why I'm here. Okay, how do I start playing with that?
mhm,
And that's where the sword's illumination came in, especially the sword of identity.
mm,
The sword of identity rules all the other swords. Just like in the trilogy of the Lord of the Rings, there's one ring that
mhm,
controls them all. This is it. And this is why it's
mhm,
so important to start with this concept.
mm,
Probably the most important concept, though, is that this identity that controls all this stuff, because my identity allows me to understand who I am, and that influences this physical plane using spiritual energy.
mhm,
So now we have the connection of all those three dimensions: myself
mhm,
as a human, this physical plane and how this place works, and the
mhm,
spiritual energy that we all keep talking about.
mhm.
And the thing that makes it all work or controllable is the identity. So for
This
the
is
longest time,
oh,
yeah,
go ahead. Keep going. No, no, no. Keep going.
sorry. This identity thing is what really challenged me the most,
Mm,
because I was watching movies, I was listening to tapes, I was listening to friends, I was listening to well-meaning people in my life. I was going to the great teachers on this planet, and they were all saying that, at least most of them were saying that I was supposed to go and find this identity. And
mhm,
then I ran into a master that totally shifted everything.
mm,
And that master shared with me, he kind of laughed in this beautiful way,
mhm,
that says, you're not here to discover who you are. You're here to create who you are. And when you start looking around this planet at successful people, people that you and I know, people that you admire, people that you go, man, there's just something about that guy, that gal that I really want to acknowledge it, but I want to be more like that. These people in your life know this secret, whether they know it consciously or not. They
Mhm.
have created their identity and they're doing the things in this physical plane to support and align and be congruent with that identity that was self-created.
Mm. I know that we discussed this a little bit in our first episode. Like you were on that path, and you mentioned a little bit here of learning, 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 taking notes, taking notes. And I see this so often, like with, maybe my newer clients, right? They're like, they've tried everything, they've tried every path. They have a lot of like intellectual knowledge. They know all about cold immersion and nutrition and training and different healing modalities, and they've maybe dabbled, but I can see instantly that underneath the surface their identity, who they believe they are, is overweight, not good enough, all never gonna make it, always gonna, end up self-sabotaging. You can feel through the
Mm,
nuances of their
mm,
energy and the little things that they
yes.
say. You can feel that as the
Ah,
identity. And you can
yes.
hear this talking over the top of it on the surface of like, "Well, I'm trying to do this and that, but, oh, well, it's life." And, you hear this surfacey, but underneath it, you can just feel the core identity is just this like, I am not ever going to be that person. Right. And this is why I think that it is so valuable that the way you phrase the question on the sort of identity is, who am I in this moment? Because when you start repeatedly asking yourself that, maybe you're trying to make a big business decision, or maybe you're trying to change some habits and relationships. You've noticed you're just kind of not really being present with your family, or you're trying to make changes in your health habits. When you can come into the moment and say, who am I in this moment? You bring yourself right back into your power of who you are, right? Versus like, oh, last 3 months ago, I went to this rah conference and I got motivated, but and I forgot all about that. Now it brings us back into the repatterning process that has to happen in order up for us to change our reality. So this one, what you're saying about creating our identity, choosing our identity, that the power of that, I completely agree with you. That has been the most profound change in my life, and that I've seen in many others, is just creating our own reality and creating our own reality through creating our identity. And when you say in this moment, you start to get reps, you start to get more
Mhm.
practice, you get that repatterning aspect of it, is like,
Beautiful.
I said I'm a rock star. I said I'm a rock star. I am a rock star. And now I'm in this meeting with a bunch of other rock stars, and I'm starting to go into these old patterns of little old me can't make it like they can. No, who am I in this moment? I am a rock star. Right. And so you show up like one. And that is how we change our reality, right? So it's so like such a simple question, but who am I in this moment? And for any of us who are doing mindset work and subconscious mind reprogramming, I'm like, oof,
There
perfectly
it is.
phrased. So I love that.
Oh,
Okay,
magnificently said.
thank you. Okay, so now we're gonna move on to our next swords. And you're right, throughout the book, um, the sort of identity comes up over and over and over in correlation with the rest of these swords. So you see that through the book. And just gotta say about the book, like, I mean, if you're somebody who likes mindset and life optimization and subconscious quantum realms, the spiritual realms, like you kind of nerd out on psychology and how we operate, like this is going to be a buffet of stimulating thoughts. So just have to throw that out there. That's how it's been for me. If you read it separating yourself from it and like this is just a story, I don't know that it will be as impacting as if you can take a moment and internally apply these things to yourself. I mean, it provoked that in me, and I hope that it provokes that in everyone else, but I just want to say that, like, take a moment to digest, take a moment to really feel these things inside of yourself and examine and ask yourself these questions as you're going through. Okay. So, sort of mission and purpose. So, the question that goes along with this next sword is, why am I here and what is my path? Why am I here? What is my path? Can you elaborate on sort of mission and purpose and why you put this one next?
So my hope is that we can just make this assumption moving forward that the foundation of this work is your created self-identity. But let's imagine I'm a rock star, right? And a rock star that, I don't know, I'm singer or I'm a guitarist or rock, a drummer or bassist or keyboardist or the myriad of amazing musicians that are on this planet today that have this rock star status. Well, you're definitely going to notice they're incredibly disciplined at their craft. There's not a single rock star that I'm aware of, and I may be completely wrong, that has not just committed who they are to that work.
Mhm.
And this is also like the samurai. Something I admire about the samurai and knowing as much as I do about them, they dedicated their lives to being this in service of others as a
Mhm.
warrior. But
Mhm.
it applies to everything even today, which says, listen, if I say I'm a world-class rock star, but I don't practice, there's the reps thing you just talked about. I love that physical aspect you just said, because one of the ways to be able to actually change programming is through practice. And one of the most interesting phrases I've heard in my lifetime is that we're under this illusion that practice makes perfect.
Mhm.
That is not how I've heard it. And it's not how it actually works. Practice actually makes permanent.
Yeah.
So when you practice something over and over again, if you're doing it absolutely terribly, you're practicing that terrible to a level of permanency.
Mhm.
When you get to a place of really understanding practice makes permanent, then you really start evaluating, hey, if I say I'm a rock star, but I'm not playing my instrument every day, if I'm not learning new music or music theory, if I'm not immersing myself in the practice of doing that stuff that's in alignment with my identity,
Right.
then you're moving away from this frequency of success and you're going to go to a frequency of failure, because that frequency is called congruency.
Yeah. Right.
When you start aligning all these other swords to the sword of identity, this is the power of it. So it isn't just one chapter. It's
Right.
the entire book series that combines, that allows you to start integrating this design of your life. And I will tell you, it's amazing that we spend more time on our weddings or, on a situation where we sit down and do something that's really life changing. But our wedding is like something that goes and all of a sudden it's gone, and then we don't do it anymore, kind of stuff. It's like, where's the practice in that?
Yeah.
But we don't do the same things with our bank accounts. We don't do the same things where creation of our identity or any of these other things, because we just haven't been trained to do this. It hasn't been part of
Mm.
our zeitgeist, if you will, kind of our programming to be able to do that. And for whatever reason, doesn't matter. It's just, we got to get back on the path. We're seriously wanting to change this experience of this place. Then this is the beginning. My identity then moves into mission and purpose. And at that point, as I know who I am, my mission and purpose will flow from me. It's not something I'm actually creating anymore. It's actually going to be just downloaded through me that just says, hey, your mission and purpose is in alignment with this. For example, if I say I'm a world-class athlete and my mission and purpose is to sit on the couch and eat Cheetos all day, they don't go together. And you naturally know that intuitively, you know that they do not go together. So your mission and your purpose, when aligned with your identity, actually starts to create this understanding of, oh, this is exactly what I need to be doing to fulfill my identity.
Mhm.
And that's where the power really comes through.
Okay, taking this example of I'm a world-class athlete, that's what I've created my identity statement, as, yet I'm not hardly ever practicing and doing it. What do you see behind that, right? Do you see sometimes people maybe have these ideals of what they think their identity is, but it's actually like that's the thing that's misaligned, or that they have, unaddressed fears and stories that they haven't dealt with yet that are blocking them from fully stepping into that. What's your experience been with that kind of incongruency?
All those things you just mentioned are what most rational excuses, if you will, and meanings behind stuff, that they're really truth. They're not just excuses, they're real.
Mhm.
But when you get down to the bottom line of it, it's because of our programming. Now, here's the deal. Most of our programming has been completed by the age of 7 years old. So between zero, that's in utero,
Mhm.
and 7 years old, most of your programming around every single subject, including how much money you're allowed to make, how much weight you're going to have, how you're going to look, how you're going to look when you're 60 or 70 years old, all this stuff gets programmed into your subconscious brain. And that's it. After that, you're just responding and reacting like any other machinery on this planet
Mhm.
that just says, hey, when I get to this place or when I reach this amount of money, that's it. I'm cutting things off. And then you just go through this wave of, I'm really excited about self-sabotage, self-sabotage. Oh, I'm really
Mhm.
excited about stuff. And because that wavelength is telling you that you're actually connected to your programming, just like a thermostat on an HVAC system. It says it's connected to the heater and it's connected to the AC. There is no overcoming that thermostat unless you physically go over there and change the thermostat.
Mhm.
We only know of a couple different ways to change the thermostat when it comes to your subconscious mind. You and I have already talked about one of those: practice.
Mhm.
You've got to practice this stuff.
Mhm.
So if I say that I'm a negotiator, right? And by the way, negotiating scares the crap out of me. Why does negotiating scare the crap out of you? Programming.
Right.
Something happened somewhere in my life that I started saying something and somebody pushed back on me and I just got upset and I've never done it again. And now
Mhm.
my job requires me to be a great negotiator. So now I have to change that. And so I have to put myself in
Yeah.
scary situations, and then it's not so scary anymore. And then, oh, okay, I got this. And I've just practiced my way through it.
Mhm.
But if you
Mm.
put your identity that I am a world-class negotiator in advance of doing that work, it accelerates that time frame of the movement from
Yeah.
actually being afraid of it and then moving into it as a ritual because it
Mm.
becomes part of who you are.
Mm.
And when you're doing things in this lifetime, this physical plane, based upon an identity about who it is, I'm just doing this because it is. I walk over, I open the door for somebody. That's just because I'm being who he is. And I'm not actually doing it for you. I'm doing it because it represents
Mhm.
this identity I've self-created. That's
Mhm.
the power of this place. That's when real experience that we keep talking about. If I am a world-class athlete or negotiator, but I don't do the work, I'm not going to have the experience of this identity.
Right. Right.
And the whole reason your soul and my soul is here is to have that experience.
Mhm.
The vehicles we choose to be a negotiator, world-class athlete, rock star, physical
Mhm.
trainer, executive coach, those are just vehicles to express who
Mhm.
we say we are. That's all they are. And they are located here for all of us to choose from. But it doesn't change your primary purpose of your soul for being on this planet. That is
Mhm.
singular for every single one of us. And I know that's an incredibly bold statement to make because it answers one of the primary questions that we've been asking for thousands of years. Why am I here?
Mhm.
To experience that which you say you are. And that is the ability for us to self-create. And the ones that are us that are very successful on this planet have self-created our identity and are living the actions or deeds or doingness that supports that identity. And when
Mm.
you do that, it changes your frequency and it changes this thing of congruency to become authenticity, to become centered. It's just who
Mm.
you are.
Yeah.
And when you do that, it attracts things to you.
I've had I can't remember if I mentioned this on the last episode, but I've had a similar, kinda download. I was out camping
Mm.
one time, and I was in this really deep meditative space going to sleep, and I'm, grounded in the middle of the desert. There's no Wi-Fi for miles. I'm just in this beautiful space. And one of the things I get caught up on sometimes is being concerned about our planet and what we're doing to it and blah, blah, blah. And I just felt this, don't worry about me so much. I got me. It's sweet.
Mm,
Like, I love you.
beautiful.
It's a beautiful energy that you care, and don't worry about me so much. And I heard, "This is a playground for souls. This is a
Mm,
playground. Enjoy,
nice.
enjoy," you know? So, it
Beautiful.
just really resonates hearing you say that because it really changed my outlook on what life is for me, you know? It's a playground, it's a buffet, there's no right, wrong, there's no good, bad, there's no and or as we'll talk about, and we
Mhm,
mentioned a little bit at the end of the episode last time. It's purely a playground. It's a place for us to experience and create whatever we so choose to create, and that's something that's been coming into my mind the last, couple weeks, actually, it's like, "Wow, like, how do I put this into words?" Our life is a direct creation. It's almost like mine sorry, my cat. It's almost like Minecraft or something. Like, we are creating our world through our beliefs, through our intent, and the world is just, that's why some people, their world is, a busy city and grind and corporate and, whatever their relationship is super different than somebody else who lives in, nature and bird watches and gardens. Like, it's just through the power of our own beliefs, identity, what we want life to be. And when we take that ownership of like, I am creating life the way that I want to, I am choosing this life. That's when we come back into the power that you're talking about in a lot of these swords. It's like, who am I? And why am I here? And what is my intention? I wrote down Yoshi, the main character says, I am Yoshi Minamura. I don't know how you say that.
mhm,
I seek to enrich my soul through the obtaining of knowledge and wisdom. In turn, I shall share this enlightenment through my actions and words in order to serve the world around me.
mm.
So, kinda inviting those of you listening, like, maybe create some statements, like, actually ask, like, "What is my identity? What is my mission and purpose?" Play with that a little bit. And then, again, see if your actions are congruent with those things or not. And then you get to play with that again, right? We get to play is like, what's going on here? Like, is my identity off, or do I have so many programs instilled in me that I'm not able to fully dive into that?
Mm.
It's those two alone. Oh my goodness. Like, you start playing with those, your whole reality is going to shift, you
I
know?
totally
Start
agree.
integrating them. Okay, let's go to our next sword. The next sword is the sword of roles. And like ROLES. And the question with this sword is, who am I? Is this right? Who am I in the specific moment of now?
Yes.
Can you elaborate on that?
So as you go through the book, you're going to see a lot of alignment that happens through this. And again, this alignment just didn't pop into my head one day. It was through years of experience and watching and observing people at a very interesting level. Even growing up in the Florida Keys, people coming down to vacation and wealth that was there. And, the very different place that I grew up that wasn't very wealthy, and all these new people coming in and tourism and just talking to people and interviewing them and just listening to the different ideas they brought. And their ideas were so different because I had a certain set of beliefs. They had a very different set of beliefs. And those, differences were clashing in these conversations I was having with them. And all of a sudden, in those conversations became these themes. And that was what attracted me and made me so curious about this, these themes that kept popping
Mm,
up. And one of those is about role distinctions.
mhm,
So role distinctions allows you to understand that you have this self-created identity, but it also has very specific elements. For example, are you the same person at a nightclub that you are at a church? Now, if you are, there's probably some medication we probably need to talk about or something that can help you out, because there's this discernment that we've got to make as human beings as we go into different things. Certain behaviors are appropriate and certain
Right.
behaviors are not. Now, we know that consciously, but I want to let you know that so much of this work that you and I are talking about on such a very conscious level is absolutely happening every single moment of your life at a very subconscious level. And that subconscious level, what we're talking about is programming.
Mhm.
So the design behind this is, remember, The real truth of free will is that you have free will to create this programming. But once you're in the programming takes care of everything. When
Mhm.
you're walking along and somebody cuts you off in traffic, why do we respond that way? Programming. Why do
Mhm.
you do certain things when you're like, oh, I don't have enough money, but I'm going to go spend some money on that. What's doing? Programming.
Mhm.
And we keep going. Now, we've heard these terms before. And this is
Mhm.
what's fascinating me. We've heard these terms before, but we're not connecting the dots. And that's what I got fascinated with is how do we make these things? I mean, what is this thing called programming, first of all? And to answer it is these 12 swords of illumination. The first book is the first six, and the second book that we're still writing is book two, is all the next
Mhm.
six. And these
Mhm.
12 swords are the different elements of that programming. Now, here's what's interesting. Now that we've chunked it down to this level of meaning and that we can really actually do something about it, how do you change that? How do you make that work? Well, now we start going these different role distinctions of realizing that I cannot be the same person that I am at work as when I go home and I'm going to be a dad or a husband or a lover. And if I am that same person, I'm definitely not going to do something that really is in alignment with who I say I am. One of the best ways you can tell if you're truly being in line with who you are is how present you can stay with someone.
Mhm.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
When you meet someone that you know the most important thing is right there in front of them, there's nothing else that can distract them. You know
Mhm.
something very unique about that person. There's no mind chatter going on. There's
Mhm.
no, what am I going to say next kind of thing. It just
Right.
seems to flow through them. You know what I'm talking about. You've been in
Yeah.
those spaces, right? Like you and
Totally.
I right now. It's just like there's
Totally.
nothing else more important than this world. That only happens, from my experience, is when I totally am in touch with who I
Mm.
really am and I understand my mission and purpose and the role that I want to play with you. For example, I know I'm an executive coach, but today's not the time for me to be an executive coach. You don't need that. You're here, we're having an interview. It's a very different role I need to
Right.
play. Here's
Right.
the difference. The people that really play at the highest levels of this are very conscious of this
Mm.
shift.
Mm.
The ones that don't do really well with this aren't very conscious of the shift and they just let the
Right.
programming kick in. This opportunity is to be able to get to really be conscientious. We all keep talking about consciousness in the
Mm.
spiritual world. This conscientious approach to designing your life is very unique, and yet it's thousands of years old.
Mm. Mm-mm-mm. I wrote down a little part from the book on this one. It's essentially summing it up. Yoshi's really confused by this one. He's like, "How can I be like so I'm supposed to be like a different person all the time?" Like, this one takes him quite a while to really grasp. He's really struggling with it, and eventually the monk takes him out and tells him to shoot a baby deer, right? And he's like, "Shoot it." And he's like really struggling. He's like, "Okay, like I don't want to shoot a baby deer, but like at the same time, I also want to learn from my, master here and like do whatever's required to become a samurai." And he's struggling with this. And then he doesn't shoot it. And his teacher says, like, "So why didn't you do it?" And he's like apologizing. He's like, "I'm so sorry. Like I couldn't do it, blah, blah, blah." And that's kind of the moment where he learns. He's like, let me see. It says, eh, he said, "Why didn't you do it?" And it says, Yoshi blurted out the only answer he had, because it did not feel right. After reflecting on his response for a moment, Yoshi continued, "That doesn't sound like a very good excuse, does it? But it is," in response, "but it is the right one because it is true to you." The monk explained, "Do not ignore your feelings, Yoshi. They let you know when your actions are incongruent with who
Mm,
you are. You
yes.
are right when you say you can do anything, be anything, but when those actions run counter to your identity, then your feelings serve as an alert system. The pain you feel in your heart lets you know that this particular action does not correspond to your identity. So I can't be everything," Yoshi surmised from the old monk's explanation. "That is not true. Just now your aim was straight, your form solid. If you released the string, you surely would have killed the deer. You can do it. You chose not to." The old monk inched closer to Yoshi to make clear his point. The gift is the ability. The skill is the awareness of the gift. And I loved that quote because that so resonates, like I go to ecstatic dance in the hippie community here, and I love to dance and I love to be super silly and like just
Right.
my inner child comes out in full bloom and I'm like smiling at everybody. I'm like this little ringleader. I'm like, yeah, this is so fun. And then I may go into a very serious discussion with a client who's dealing with, deep old traumas they're talking about. I'm not going to be silly inner child, Tara. I'm going to be more like empathetic, loving, holding space, feeling that with her. And to me, the thing where this identity and these roles and where it all comes together for me is that internal connection to self of feelings. How where at what point, let's say I'm at the ecstatic dance and some guy wants to start dancing all like inappropriately with me.
Right.
Like I don't want to do that. That's where now it shifts and that feeling of discomfort or that feeling of it's not just discomfort, it's a feeling of no. It's like a deep inner
Yes.
that goes against who I am at my core. Whereas, maybe in a relationship, that's a different story, right?
Right.
And so I loved that quote because it really kind of like clarified that for me. It's like your feelings are an alert system. Your inner identity will come up in a feeling. For me, it feels almost like a hesitation, like a space, like where I'm
Mhm.
like, whoa, something's off here. Something's
Yes.
off. Ooh. And sometimes I have to sit with that, and maybe it's a big decision I'm making in my life, or I gotta sit with that and eventually honoring, like, why am I feeling this hesitation? Sometimes I'm like, I have to really break it down. Sometimes I'm like, is
Mhm.
this fear? Is this programs? Are these stories? Am I projecting on them? Or is this like a true, this is going against my value system? So sometimes I have to take that moment and like really extend it for a while. And, maybe when I'm 75 years old, that will become a much shorter amount of time. But that to me really clarified like, yes, we are going to behave differently in different scenarios, but that feeling inside of us will be
Mm.
the alert system of when something is starting to push up against our identity. Any thoughts on that?
Beautiful said. Yeah, there's so much to unpack there. And so, I mean, I love the life you're living, my friend. I truly do, because you're
You.
really playing at the soul level, this experimentation of experience, and where you can
Mhm.
go and be with the gypsies or the what did you
Yeah.
say, the hippies,
Hippies.
and just play. Man, that just spoke to my soul because you're playing with this, and so few
Yeah.
of us have remembered to do that because life gets so serious because it is. There's consequences here. There's real evil going on here. Okay, I get it. That's
Mhm.
not saying anything about this. What's really important about our conversation right now is that we've also started buying into this illusion that our feelings are always going to tell us the truth. And that's not how this works here.
Mhm.
Our feelings are connected to our identity,
Mhm.
an identity that was either created consciously by you or subconsciously chosen by you.
Mhm.
You are still responsible.
Mhm.
And when feelings happen, there are a reaction or a response or an alarm clock to what's going on in your environment compared to what you say you are, who you say you are.
Mhm.
That's it's just a response, a reaction.
Mhm.
Feelings don't tell you the truth of things, they tell you a truth of
Yep.
things.
Yep.
And that discernment is huge, as you
Mhm.
know,
Mhm.
because when we start having these feelings, we start saying that's the truth. That
Right.
it's in alignment with who you say you are. So when you really break this down, you start to find out that feelings are designed to be able to tell you where you're actually located in the learning curve around the subject you're experiencing.
Mhm. Mhm.
Take that in for a second.
Mhm.
Holy crap. That if
Mhm.
we all bought into that theory, it would change everything we're experiencing on this planet because
Mhm.
we'd take a whole new level of responsibility for what's going on here. Because we're saying to ourselves, we don't like what's going on. That's why there's so much stress. There's why so much frustration. There's why so much worry. We're saying that something is not congruent with how we'd like to create it.
Mhm.
And it's just a signal. It's just an alarm clock. Hey, Buddha, wake up.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
so when the soul is stirred to awakenness, through these alarm systems.
Mhm.
We can then reevaluate, like you just did so beautifully, is I really need to sit down and I really need to evaluate that. And I really need
Yeah.
to take a look at my value systems and my
Right.
role distinctions, my identity. And you start going through this pattern of your design, your
Mhm.
programming, and you're doing this
Exactly.
unconscious. You hadn't read the book yet when you did all those over all those years, but now this starts giving you structure. Like, holy crap, I really need to sit down and really think about this.
Mhm.
What should I be thinking about it? How should I be thinking about it? Why should I be thinking about it? Let's take a look at it from a place of structure with a formula, with
Yeah.
these elements that really can change that programming. Because until that programming changes, in the short term, you can change your behavior, but in the long term, you're going to revert back to that behavior if you haven't practiced that change enough to be able to change that programming.
Mhm. Yeah, I think playing around with why we feel the way we do is one of the
Mm.
most, uh, it's in the most energy of ownership that we can possibly be in, you know? Why
Yes.
do I feel that way about blah, 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 you know? And just marveling at that because it's, the ego will come out immediately like, well, because that's messed up or because that's horrible or because that's, a bad way to be.
Yes.
Is it?
Yes.
Let's play with that for a second. Woo. That space, like being able to go into that right there is, in my opinion, how you start creating your life and reprogramming the subconscious mind and finding all these programs. It doesn't mean you might not end up in the same place.
Mm.
You might think that, you just hate cats, you hear that from hate cats, they're horrible, they're evil, blah, blah, blah. Okay, well, let's play with that, Why? Why do you feel that way? Okay, maybe try playing around with it and just flipping that lens for I love cats and finding what you love about them and spend some time around cats. And if at the end of it, you've really opened yourself up and you've tried different experiences and you're like, cats are just not for me, cool. But being willing to play with it is like this playground. It's
Absolutely.
yeah. Okay. I wanted to hit a little bit on this concept of balance that comes up a lot in the
Mm.
book. Um, and there's a part where Yoshi's teacher, the monk, is basically going to cut off one of his pinky finger. Okay,
Mm.
you know that part. And let's see, I wrote this down. This monk is like such a wonderful teacher. He's just like, "What? You don't?" So it's, "What the hell are you doing?" Yoshi screamed. It is the smallest finger on your least dominant hand. You will still be able to function and have a fairly normal life without it. The monk placed the blade's sharp edge on the crease where the finger met the palm. Are you crazy? It will hamper my ability to fight and work and many other things. Yoshi's brain fumbled for other reasons to defend his finger's importance, but the fact he had to offer any defense blew his mind. But it's such a little thing, the monk said in an infant like tone. The blade's edge was nearly piercing the skin. Okay, okay, I get the point. Yoshi felt a relaxation in the old monk's surprisingly tight grip. Okay, and then I skip a little. Daichi, the name of this monk, Daichi held out his hands again with the fingers extended just like he had. Oh no, I'm not falling for that again, old man, Yoshi said, shaking his head furiously. Closing a finger as he read off each item, the old monk recited the following: physical, mental, emotional, business, community, financial, relationship, family, spiritual, and health. They each represent a beam on the wheel, Yoshi acknowledged. No, they each represent an area of balance in life. Each is of equal importance, and each is vitally necessary to lead a complete life. You are right, Yoshi-san. The device I ride is a metaphor. It represents one's ability to navigate an existence in harmony with oneself. As you see, when one of the wheel's beams is deficient, the ride becomes bumpy. As you have also seen, when one area of your life is deficient, your life becomes difficult to navigate. So my issues with relationships affect everything else. How can it not? You are the same person in all these arenas of life. If you are unfit in one, it cannot help but cause you pain. Okay. And so I kind of wanted to just read that little excerpt because this is a huge, concept of becoming a samurai is like that balance. And so I was wondering if you could elaborate a little bit on, how you see balance and how when one area is off, like how that impacts us on a soul level.
So much about being samurai in this metaphor for my life kind of stuff is being in life of truly being in service of others. It isn't about walking around with a sword and being a warrior and all those other things. It's having a warrior mentality in this physical plane because it's a scary place. We get that. But it's about really approaching life from that warrior kind of approach as opposed to the worrier kind of approach. Right. And this is
Mhm.
where so much of the fear really comes from. Now, let's just pause there for a minute and realize if I say to you, who are you really? Then you have to take a moment and really think about what was the master asking when they asked that kind of question. Who we are, Tara, is we're divinity.
Mhm.
There is nothing that is not powerful within us. Yet, as soon as we come into this physical realm, we start creating beliefs about who we are.
Mhm.
When you're creating your programming, we actually take clients through a process of realizing there's two sources that you can actually create your program from. One is called our ego. And there's no shadow of a doubt that most of us are creating our programming through ego in this physical plane because you just have to take a look around and realize, holy crap,
Mhm.
this isn't divinity, this is ego.
Mhm.
What if there was another source that we could get access to and pull from that frequency and that energy and pull some of that into our identity?
Mhm.
Now, I've experienced this in both ways. From the ego perspective, living in South Beach, Miami Beach, number one real estate agent in the world. I was his business manager. I mean, we could go through the list of working for Tony Robbins. I've lived this ego world, believe me. And I've lived with the debt that goes along with it. I've lived with the fantastic experiences that have gone on with that. And I will tell you that then I switched over and I went all the way pendulum the other way. And I was like, oh, let's just do the spiritual thing. I didn't get to the white robe kind of concept. I was just, too comfortable in my suit. But I mean, I went and I truly immersed myself in that world. And I will tell you that if you sit long enough in a spiritual pose of just this beautiful place and there's insets going on, the bells are ringing, everything else like this, you just sit there long enough, people are going to show up and start taking your furniture. This physical plane is about being able to integrate both the ego and the soul.
Yeah, exactly.
Here's
Exactly.
why. When you leave this dimension, you don't get to take your ego with you. You get to go back to another playground where your soul only exists, where you are the everything. You are going to have plenty of time. You came here for a reason and a purpose to integrate the experience of all that spiritual knowingness into this physical plane. So to then just say, no, I'm only going to do one or the other
Mhm.
escapes the point.
Mhm.
It's about integrating that and
Mhm.
taking from those two sources and
Mhm.
integrating a new creation of who you say you are.
Mhm.
And when you're
Mhm.
able to do that using the structure of the sword's illumination, you start living a very different experience in this physical plane. And
Mhm.
a lot of the things that you used to think were really important go away. And a lot of things that now weren't even on your radar become incredibly important. And that's the magical thing about watching people really shift this programming about
Mhm.
how it's like, I've made these changes. Now I'm doing this work and now I'm experiencing things completely different than just 2 weeks ago, a week ago, a month ago, or a year ago. And it's really fascinating to watch how this technology really does help us navigate through this magical world.
Mhm. Yeah, you're hitting on something that stirs deep in my soul. I often think of the famous little line from Ram Dass, the "Be Here Now." You see
Mm,
"Be Here Now" shirts and caps, and I always think, because I love all the, Eastern teachings, and I have applied, gone through active practices of really just being in that thoughtless mind for months on end, and, kind of these ego deaths that kinda happen, and you're like, "Whoa," like, I'm in this, like, totally different place, but to me, "Be Here Now" means be human,
mm,
be ego. Take care of your ego, love your
yes.
ego. Just like if you're really in, God consciousness, what do people who like pray to God, what do they expect this loving, God that will take care of them and provide for them. Do that for yourself.
Mm,
Be that way for your own ego,
yes.
Give your ego everything. Give it love, support, nourishment, experience, joy, and this is a piece that I see. I don't know, I just sit back and look at I want to be in my ego.
Mm,
That's why I'm here. That's the
yes.
whole point of going through this whole I, like, came out of a birth canal and got a body thing. I wanna fully experience ego
Yes.
with connection to my divine self all at the same time. That's the ride. That's the joy. I never wanna be so quote unquote "spiritual" that I'm looking down on others who are programmed or, thinking I'm somehow this spiritual elite that I somehow am better because I'm denying myself the experience of having a body and being an ego. Like, I'm like, "No, no, no, like, this is the whole point." Like, just like you said, I'm gonna go back to that space after this body dies. I'll do that then. Right
Yes.
now, I'm an ego and I wanna be in it, you know? Yeah.
And you just beautifully, through experience, so magnificently, expressed balance.
Mhm,
See, when we do one or the other of both, as opposed to this and that,
mhm,
and now we're getting to it, right?
mhm,
It's about
mhm,
how do we create balance? Because if you just bring all your ego, and I've lived there and I've done my whole soul thing, and I will tell you that wasn't balanced at all. And I felt the imbalance to it.
mhm,
And
mhm,
the universe will definitely let you know when you're out of balance. It's going to give you some very interesting perspectives or
mhm,
feedback when you're
mhm,
not. But
mhm.
as a physical trainer, and by the way, love your videos. I'm always checking out your Facebook
Thanks.
stuff because it's always, letting me know that, and I'm brand new to that stuff. But
Thanks.
you know better than I do about this ability for our bodies to get into homeostasis, which is a form of
Yeah.
balance. You
Yes.
can be 300 pounds and
Yes.
your body will find balance.
Yeah.
It's this perfect machine that just goes, whoa, we're going this way. Oh, I'm going to pull you back over this way. Well,
Right.
now we're talking about this in a much more conscious level because being 300 pounds isn't healthy to the body. There's going to be some things that happen. And
Mhm,
I know we're having a lot of discussion about body shaming and all these other things. Listen, the body is a machine that if you don't take care of it, it's going to be less performance oriented. If you
mhm,
take really exceptionally good care of it, it's going to have much more performance things for you to be able to achieve by the doingness of who you say you are.
mhm,
So there's this constant thing that we're looking for and balance. Now it's about bringing this mental balance to it, this spiritual balance to it, which is about the integration of both the ego and the soul into a conversation. But here's the
mhm,
thing: if my ego uses me, then that's what's going to happen. And that's the experience I'm going to have. If
mhm,
my soul uses me, then that's the experience I'm going to have. But how about if I use my ego and my soul to be able to experience things?
mhm,
And that's something we call the fifth element, where you
mhm,
actually integrate mind, body, soul, and ego into the creation of who you say you are.
mhm,
When you do
mhm,
that, it's a totally different life experience.
mhm. It's like your soul is having the most fun.
Beautiful.
That's what it feels like. Your soul's like, "Look at me, I'm Tara Garrison." You know?
Yes.
"Woo, let's be Tara Garrison.
Let's
This is
celebrate that for a
fun."
minute.
Yeah. Okay, oh, man. Okay, so for the sake of time, I'll kinda just there's a few more swords. There's a sort of I wish we had time to go through all of these. There's the sort of outcomes. Oh, that's what we were just talking about. Okay, there's the sort of values. Oh, yeah, we might have to finish on that one. Um, the question with that one is what values do I desire in order for me to fulfill the destiny of who I have chosen to be? And the last one is the sort of decisions. What decision that I do at this moment will create my life's path. Oh man, the chapters on the sort of values are so powerful. I can't recommend them enough. There's a part where I'm paraphrasing, but essentially it's like when you are pushed to your limits enough, you're stressed and you're in this like critical moment of just like push to your like you have to make a snap decision, your values will always win out on what you decide there. So powerful. Anything you'd like to elaborate on in terms of values and how to understand this in ourselves?
So in the 2 book series, you start to understand there's a formula to this. There's a strategy to this. There's a structure to this. I keep mentioning
Nice.
this.
Nice.
And in that, we're not going to go too far into that today, but your beliefs and values are part of this machine, this engine
Yeah.
that drives the entire transmission of the
Right.
rest of your behaviors to things, because your
Totally.
beliefs and values drive your behaviors. Your
Totally.
behaviors over time create your results. Results over time create your destiny.
Mhm.
What the
Mhm.
hell did you just say? But
Mhm.
if you take a look at it, you observe it, you'll see this truth to this.
Totally. Totally.
Here's the challenge. We know this. We're talking about it
Mhm.
consciously, but then people come to me as a coach and say, I really don't like the results I'm getting in my life. I'm like, well, great. Let's take a look at your behaviors. Nah, I don't want to do that because I really like my behaviors. I'm going to keep those. Okay, so you're going to keep your behaviors, but you're expecting a different result. Well, then we go right back to Einstein, which is, doing the same thing, behavior over and over again, expecting a different result is the definition of insanity, right?
Right.
Now, if you're insane, you nailed it because it's who you are.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
if you really want to make a difference, then you've got to let go and be able to replace that behavior with something else. Now,
Mhm.
we just said this. Changing the behavior does change the result. There's no doubt about that. There are certain things you got to be willing to do to be able to get certain results in this physical plane.
Right.
Now, the soul doesn't always like to hear that because the soul is so powerful that it believes it can do anything, and it can.
Mm.
But in this physical plane, there are limitations. You can do everything and anything. But if you're really going to make a difference in this thing, you've got to focus on just a couple of things. So I just went from a million or a billion different opportunities, but I have to select a couple of things that I want to choose to experience while I'm here.
Yeah.
That's choices. That's what we have to do. And that choice then comes from who you say you are.
Mhm.
It starts selecting those probabilities and possibilities that some of those, of all those things, some of them just start fading away. Like me being a professional basketball player, that went away pretty early. Once I realized I wasn't going to get above 5'9", right? That was going to be a challenge for me, kind of stuff. But those kind of things are all based upon this programming that we have to be able to take a look at.
Mhm.
Does that make sense?
100%. And I think with the values thing, like a really wonderful opportunity to examine that in ourselves is when we make a quick decision. Like
Mm-hmm.
observe yourself when you make a super fast decision and just ask yourself, what values do I have that cause me to make that quick decision? For example, this morning, a friend of mine invited me to go to the spa here that I love. And I normally during my gym time, I could make that happen. We got a cold plunge and a sauna and
Oh
like
yeah.
and get to hang out with a friend. I mean, that sounds great. I would have loved to have done that, but I had to get ready for this podcast episode. And my value there, even though I value all of that, I value health, I value friendships, I value more keeping my word. And this was a
Perfect.
commitment that I already had versus this other one was a spur of the moment invite, right?
Yes.
And so I actually sat with that for a second, and I was like, yes, yes, I do value keeping my commitments. I do like how I made that choice. Now, in a different circumstance, I might, you know, um, maybe I'm on my phone and I'm messaging back people, random strangers on the internet while my son is trying to tell me a story about his video game. And I'm like, hang on, Mike, I'm busy. That might be a moment where I'm like, whoa, what am I valuing more here? My need to answer these random strangers on the internet or my son who's standing right? And that's when whew, we redirect, right? Like, whoa, what? Um, hang on one second, Micah. Let me finish this one sentence. Okay, put it down.
There you
What's
go.
go what tell me what happened? Wow, dude, that's crazy, so I like that for values, and one other thing I'll just throw in here real quick is I had a mindset coach, that I love. He said, "Your values are what you spend your time and your money on, so if you want to know what you value, look at your calendar and your bank account." Beautiful, right?
Beautiful.
So and it goes beyond that too. It's those snap decisions are, in my opinion, always value-based. If you hold the door open
Absolutely.
for somebody or not. If
Yes.
you, get into road rage. Mm, if you need to be right all the time. in your arguments. What do you value? You value your need to be right over the relationship, and just owning that is like, whoop, let me play with that one, you know?
Beautiful. Yeah, I love that. So
Um,
let's just take that scenario,
yeah,
right? Where you're invited to this thing, you've got this commitment that you have, but you know what? You go a different way. No, notice how this is tied together. Your value is connected to your identity.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
Your beliefs and your values are the machine, this engine that drives your transmission of behavior.
yep,
It's how you demonstrate things. So if I want to know you as a coach, and this is how we work, all I need to do is have you show up a couple of times and just watch you. Are you on time? Are you late? Are you early? And I'll see it because there's a pattern that you have because you
right,
can't fight your programming. Your
right,
behaviors are based upon your programming. And the
mm-hmm,
elements of that programming are your beliefs and your values and part of your behaviors, all these other things that are part of the swords limit. All these things are designing to create these behaviors, and
mm-hmm,
those behaviors are creating your results in your life. So
100%.
back to the gym. You know what? You don't share this story. You go ahead and you make a phone call to our assistant, say, hey, I got something that just came up, and, I really can't be there. And you have a blast. You go to the spa,
Mhm,
you have an
mhm.
absolute blast of a time. You're like, and then I know you get home and you go, oh,
Yep,
I
yep,
really shouldn't have done that. Because see how your value didn't align with your
mhm,
beliefs, and it's
mhm.
going to come back and haunt you.
Totally, been there many times.
Yes. That's why we can live this together, my friend, right?
Mhm,
So this is the interesting thing, that those impulses, those are interesting things, because people say oftentimes that, well, that opportunity wouldn't even present itself as it wasn't something I should do. Or that presented to you for you to give yourself the opportunity to understand and experience who you truly are.
mm.
Come on.
Come on, I
This
think
is
that's the perfect way to cap out this episode. Wow. David, thank you so much.
uh,
I so appreciate this book. I so appreciate your time. I so appreciate your giving of your gifts, sharing of your gifts, living, walking the walk of what you're sharing in here,
mm,
being in a service mindset, having enough self love to be in a service mindset towards yourself. Because you said you mostly wrote this book in hopes that future you might stumble across it when you come here in another lifetime, which is self love and unconditional love for others. And so I so appreciate you. Thank you so much for coming on the show again and sharing with us.
and thanks so much for everything you do. I couldn't come on your show without your hard work. And believe me, this is something I'm getting brand new to, but the amount of effort that you put into this, the amazing things you do, my friend, I'm just truly glad to be on this planet with you.
Likewise. Thanks so much.
See you soon.
Hey, thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Inside Out Health Podcast. I hope this episode served as inspiration and something that you needed to hear in your life. If you have a friend or family member that you think would benefit from this episode, please share it with them. And also, please subscribe. I have so many more amazing guests coming. I have just been so gifted and honored to meet so many incredible health professionals in my career, and I cannot wait to share their messages with you guys. So please subscribe. And if you could be so kind as to rate my show, I would really appreciate it. This podcast is honestly an intuitive call to me to help spread goodness to the world. And so if you guys can help me do that, I would really appreciate it. If you want more info on this guest, pop over to my website, check out my podcast section, and you can get links to everything we talked about in the show, and find out more about this guest and where you can go from here. Make sure you're also following me on Instagram. That is my most active platform. You can find me at Coach Tara Garrison. You can also find me on YouTube, LinkedIn, Twitter. Everything is Coach Tara Garrison across the board. And then, if you want to send me a message, guys, and let me know other guests or other topics you want to hear on the show, please let me know. I am here to serve you. So would love to hear from you, would love your feedback on the show. And if you share any of these episodes, please tag me on social media. It's Coach Tara Garrison.